Welcome everybody again to another version of the Squeaky Wheel. I'm the captain, Ross Memphis Pammer, and with me as always is my friend and co-host, the President, Lawrence Gervais. We're broadcasting from Calgary in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta. This is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We'd also like to thank and acknowledge the lands of our traditional territories, the Blackfoot Confederacy, including Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and the Nakota, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. We'd also like to thank you to our First Nation friends, to the Métis settlements, to all of the Métis brothers and sisters out there who are listening to us today. We'd also like to give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for the time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. And now, to get the party started, no further ado, Lawrence Gervais. Lawrence, we're changing up our podcast just a little bit this week and maybe a little bit as we identify some changes in the future, because today I happen to be at the Memphis Group Computer Lab as things are getting sorted out and I couldn't be in my usual office. And we're trying to really focus a little bit more on some of the things that are happening locally to keep our listeners engaged. So thank you again to all those listeners. Lawrence, before we jump into Louis Riel, tell us a little bit about the things that are going on.
Well, I mean, it's been a very, I'd say, rewarding week. It's nice to see all those videos that we put online. And we got the fashion program, which we'll probably touch on pretty soon here. We got that announcement out, so things have been going great. I know you're in some type of bunker, probably 10 feet under the ground, and probably where all the toilet paper is. No.
Yeah. The time the sun shines is the only time is when I come in here or go out of it. Otherwise, the sun doesn't reach this area.
Just remember to have your vitamin D. That's all. You know.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
yeah, and I know we got a number of things we want to get to our guests, talking about. And I think as we're sort of reevaluating a little bit of our own squeaky wheel, between you and me and some of the conversations we've had with our production manager Jason, if we keep it to 30 minutes of the hard-hitting information that people want to hear, I think we're looking at some of the areas that our subscribers really want to pay attention to. So, folks, if you have any questions for us, and the questions that we do get, make sure you send them to tsw@métis3.org. Lawrence, I want to talk a little bit about Louis Riel. So we just got through Métis Week, a lot of success, a lot of energy that's come out. Big shout out to groups like Rupert's Land and their funding strategies towards Métis youth and anybody who's applying for education. So, as we all know, Louis Riel Day, November 16th, 1885, he was executed for his role standing up against government, as it were, trying to establish, the Métis Nation and create determination of Métis lands and their rights. So, there was a great article this week in many of the newspapers regarding Audrey as she's having conversation about self-government. Take me through that.
Well, I mean, we've been trying to get self-government in place with the Métis Nation since 1816, and the Seven Oaks really established or even the skirmishes around Seven Oaks prior to that with the Pemmican Wars, and really the nation sort of forming in itself when Hudson's Bay Company, Northwest Company were kind of dwindling the fur trade, and the Métis Nation, the Métis people at that time kind of realized, or Michif people, were kind of realizing, we need to join forces here because there's nobody to take care of us anymore. There's no jobs. So that's when they started to exercise it. And I think when the Pemmican Proclamation came, and then they started to limit the food sources, they all came and rallied together. And then, of course, you have that generation below, like after that, including Louis Riel Sr., who brought that sort of idealism of government to Louis Riel himself, and certainly witness to the Papillon rebellions in Quebec. There was that nationhood example setting forth again in Louis Riel. And when those, I guess you could say surveyors came from Canada to survey Red River, well, then he kind of said, well, no. And that's, on Andre Nault's property. And that's when that whole rebellion started. And he formed his own government right away and started to enact that this is a Métis Nation that you need to talk to. Well, we kind of still take that I would say, prospectus for moving forward, especially when we're talking to government, to say, yeah, we are a Métis nation, and we have been for a long time. As long as our flag's been flown since 1816, right? So, you really have to understand that when you're kind of moving into Western Canada, that the homeland, the Métis homeland, was sort of setting forth that nationhood. And we kind of are exercising that because of Daniels, because of all these. Canada now has a fiduciary responsibility to Métis people. Well, now we really have to bring back that conversation of what the Métis Nation will look like. So, and I think that's applying to, each individual provinces, because that's how we are now, our current makeup. But back then, it was just Rupert's Land in the Northwest Territories. It wasn't just confined to a province.
So, Lawrence, in that kind of aspect of conversation, when we talk about self-government, we're not necessarily saying that we are trying to remove all Métis relationship with the federal government, but we need to be included in the conversation. Or what aspect of self-government, what self-government do we start with? Because where does Audrey have to start when we talk about that conversation of self-government?
Well, number one, when Canada has to sort of give the right permission for us to move into self-government. So we're kind of sitting and waiting for that process to be played out in Ottawa, right? So then once that happens, there will be a transfer from Societies Act for Métis Nation of Alberta. We drop the association off our names and we become a government. What happens with self-government, though, is a different type of system. So whether we move into a constituent sort of system where the locals become more of a still run as maybe a nonprofit, I'm not sure, or
right.
If we they're under the sort of the Métis Nation umbrella, but definitely would be probably looking at the way Parliament and provincial governments are run more constituent, like an area, and then those people under the area, so. And then how do we access programs? Well, we have certainly it would probably be a less bureaucratic system in terms of getting our funding and things of that nature. But I'm sure a whole government department would have to be set up.
Right, but at least we would be included in the conversation.
Yeah, but you see, one of the sort of issues First Nations have had in the past with self-government was always, well, we move away from the Treaty Act and we're no longer part of the Indian Act. We move into this different sort of transfer, right? Métis Nation citizens are always concerned of that because, what does that mean? Does it mean Canada doesn't have that fiduciary responsibility anymore? Or do they? What is going to be in the agreements, right, moving forward? Because now they do. And it was because of the agreements they made with, with Louis Riel, right? So.
Right, and the Daniels decision has definitely helped expand that conversation on behalf of the Métis, where the government at all levels have to have that conversation.
Yeah, and we have a Constitution Commission now that's set up, so they're going to be listening to citizens. We had a bunch of roundtables that were planned for November, December. They've all been canceled due to COVID restrictions. So hopefully in the new year, in the spring, that's when they can start their work and getting information to the citizens. Being there for as many hearings as they can to hear from our members on where we want to see, the Constitution will go. So at this time, it's really hard for us to really forecast anything because none of the roundtables have even started. So.
Now, if we develop an aspect of self-government, before we jump into the Métis Design event and the fashion design program, I wanted to ask, during the month of November or Movember, as a Métis Nation, can we determine the length of your mustache?
Well, it's actually going pretty good. I'm really surprised, but it's a lot more grayer this year. So, and I did get a mustache comb, right? So
are the citizens, as citizens, can we determine the length of your mustache through voting?
No, but I actually am thinking about curling the ends pretty soon. I remember my dad used to do that in the 80s, right? So.
Well, we'll have to talk to Jason then again about putting out a survey for all of our listeners to determine what would be the acceptable length of Lawrence's mustache. And thank you for doing that. Movember is very important to all of our community. As we know, though I do have the ability to occasionally put a mustache on, I'm not allowed to do more because my mask for firefighting has to be able to fit my face. But I'm always impressed with those guys who can fill out a good looking mustache, and yours is looking great.
So are you fighting fires in the basement there? And
Maybe not necessarily today, but yeah, very soon enough is my goal. So Lawrence, let's talk about the fashion design program, because this is an exciting launch, and we need all of our listeners, to share this message about what's coming for this opportunity for our artists.
Well, I mean, number one, it's centered around the Hudson's Bay Company blankets. There's always controversies in all of our communities about what that role of the blankets were in the older days, but it's certainly a link to, First Nations and Métis. And we, had this idea to go with Parks Canada to look at, possible making the garments out of these blankets and then selling them in a traveling sort of fashion show later on, probably in the summer or in the years to come, hopefully. But we really needed to start somewhere. So we have, we're going to be picking, fashion designers from across Canada who are Métis Nation, and they're going to have carte blanche at these blankets that are the part of the 350-year anniversary blankets, 9 point, I'm sure. And they'll have every option to design their clothing. And once we're done, we'll have a big show and music showcase, and then we'll have a traveling fashion show.
Well, I know we do a great job of identifying through our social media the events that are happening. So, folks, I know you're going to find it there. The other thing is that when these get released, we want everybody to participate. I'm excited that we're going to start seeing our tailors, our seamstresses, and you don't have to be a fashion designer. We want everybody to come forward with a design and something that's going to capture the attention and the history of the Hudson's Bay blanket. I 100% agree.
Yeah, and we haven't the adjudicators are all in the fashion area, so they have expertise. We've even borrowed from our Treaty 7 community one of their fashion designers to help with who already designs clothing for a lot of the Stampede princesses and works with those blankets already. So we're pretty excited that she's on board. So it's nice. Going to be great.
And the Stampede princesses and the our Indigenous princess, absolutely beautiful. And they shine a lot more than you and I do, Lawrence, when they're down at the grounds. Though we look, I think, pretty good. I think that, they're the ones that everybody's looking at. Now let's talk a little bit about snowbirds. Right. Because I know what we're seeing is, and here's the hardest message, because, the borders are being shut. The provincial borders, there's always conversation. Our elders, our seniors, and anybody who wants to go south, we're still only in November. And actually, we've been doing pretty good here, I think, in Calgary when it comes to weather. But we're going to start seeing probably some of the changes come in December, January, the hardest months. My attitude is, folks, make sure you don't forget all of those family and friends at home. I know it's getting harder. There's nothing wrong with just dropping a little basket of something and some smiles off on the doorstep and waving as you go, and utilize the different types of media that we use. For example, use the Zooms out there, use the MS Teams, use the Google Drives, the Google Visuals in order to try and interface. But what are we going to do? What's another message that we could be sharing with our Métis elders?
Well, it's always a connection thing. So, we're trying our hardest to look at virtual meetings with them now. Before we used to see them in person. They used to come to the office for a seniors lunch every couple of weeks, and then they had their crib tournaments too. And, they can't do any of those right now. So, we had a meeting just yesterday talking about different ways and how we're going to connect with them, whether it's online bingos or even just a coffee, and they kind of come on the screen for, just to check in, And I think it's important for a lot of the seniors who are alone right now, probably desperate for stuff to do.
Well, and everybody just wants that bit of connection. We've had guests on, and including my own father, who all of a sudden realizes that friends he knew are no longer with us. Right? We're losing that connection where we are seeing community being able to share the message of what's happened within our community. We're losing that. So I know we're trying to rebuild some of that when it comes to even just our website and more social media presence, but it's also educating these seniors. And maybe that's actually something that should be really a big focus. And I know we've talked about it with Rupert's Land and with some of our other agencies, saying we need to work at how we connect our seniors. Our youth aren't doing too bad. They've found those social media sites.
Yeah.
And as much as I don't want to teach George how to use Twitter, maybe that's what's coming.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the big challenge, right? I mean, they need a lot more one-on-one to set up their computers and their cameras and get into this technology of Zoom and Teams and all that, right? It's foreign to them. Like, so, I think a part of it, if we go around and say, yeah, let's host this event, is getting the young people in their families maybe to help them get set up, or people that are in their household, right?
That's a great point. Yeah, that's actually a fantastic point, Lawrence. A lot of our messaging still has to go to the youth. Be patient with the seniors and elders because they're lacking that connection as well, and we need to set aside a little bit of time to make sure that we re-engage, that they help re-engage that.
Yeah.
Aspect of family.
But even though they're the most vulnerable population, we're protecting them as best we can. Well, then we certainly need to. They're a little more social sometimes too, and we can't forget that. That's a big need for them.
Right, and how do we continue to create that? So, wanted to jump on to Métis Works. So I know I'd recently got an email on December 2nd, they're doing Business Links Indigenous Services, Entrepreneur and Indigenous Business Relationships. So big shout out to all those groups that are really concentrating on working with Métis companies. And when it comes to, Métis entrepreneurs, small, medium enterprises, if you can facilitate as much conversation as you can within your own social connection, for example, the Métis Nation and our Métis Works, that's just going to continue to open some of the doors, with our larger partners who are looking for that type of support. And there's a lot of support out there, I find, for Indigenous entrepreneurs and Indigenous companies. But I think that message it also needs to reach these individuals to say, go ahead and join. And usually you can find all this stuff through our provincial website for sure, based on the size of that relationship. But yeah, I'm really encouraging people that they need to try and look into those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about procurement, right? And they, companies that I've talked to have always asked, so who are the Métis-owned contractors and how do we get in touch with them, right? That's always a question.
Because how do we hire them if they're not doing the work? And I do know Métis Works on there, and you can find the Memphis group on there as well. So I recommend it. And if anything, it keeps you involved in the conversation. You may not want to join everything. It's difficult when you're a business person, but when at least when you're aware of it, you can determine its value based on the time you put into it. So now, funny tale I want to tell, and encourage this to the all of our listeners, because it's coming right now. Black Friday's coming, everybody, and it's been here and it's staying here, and all the sales are coming. I ended up buying a new office chair and on a Saturday, and by 24 hours later, I'm receiving an email for the Black Friday sale. Oh, now, how hard do I want to work to try and get that difference in that money back? So I've already sent an email. My only thing I could recommend, and I always laugh at it every year, you're looking for something, how long do you wait before you buy it?
I don't know. Black Friday to me is always like, yeah, you can shop online, get all your stuff. And I have a friend of mine who's one of the managers at Best Buy was saying it was so busy that day at the store.
Really?
And people were calling in sick because they didn't want to come in. And
yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, you get the same deals online. You don't have to go in person to get your TV and your whatever, especially during COVID. But
they do say that the people who go in to buy something are 70% likely to keep it, whereas the people who order it online, I think the return rates were something like 40 or 50%. It was astronomical. I was so surprised.
Where did you read that data?
Well, I do read the Globe and Mail and the New York Times, but the
fake news.
I can't. Yeah, okay, that could very well be. I can't cite it exactly, but I don't do a lot of shopping that way. But sometimes when it does happen, but it happens. It happens to all of us all, and people, fortunately, within our economy right now, seem to want to spend a few dollars.
Yeah.
But if you can't go to the store, we're having a hard time doing it. So, to our businesses, stay strong. Try to really encourage local commitments so that we're all supporting the local groups, because you're going to miss them when they're gone.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
I've done half of my Christmas shopping already because I don't want to go to those department stores when they're busy in December, right? So
I assume you took out a loan to get my gift, but thank you for already buying it now that I know.
Yeah.
Vaccines and compliance.
Gosh, yeah.
I wanted to come out as something real fun, because I don't want to stack all the hard conversations on top of each other. It's emotionally exhausting.
So this is the fun part.
Okay, here's the fun one, everybody. The one of the biggest challenges is us waiting for a vaccine.
Yeah.
What we're also forgetting is the aspect of safety, and Trudeau was talking about it today, and compliance. Getting people to feel comfortable. When do we know it's safe? When do we know we're comfortable with it? So it's a terrifying prospect of waiting. It's a terrifying prospect. When do I take it? How is my body going to react to it? CNBC had put out an article saying it won't be a walk in the park. It's not, like the flu vaccine. Hard to say. Afterwards, I felt my arm was sore for a good day and a half. And I'm like, tired. That could just be a schnook here in Calgary. But let's keep our fingers crossed.
Well, I think it'll be safe once everybody turns a normal color again, right? And then okay, it's time to take it. No, but I think, like, I know they're going through stage 3 trials, and I think there's like 16 companies already having developed in stage 3.
Mm-hmm.
We're waiting for this approval. I think 6 are limited use, and those are in China and Russia, and they've been already giving vaccines out to citizens already. And saying it's 95% effective, right? I think what's going to happen is just a rollout issue. I think that's probably going to be the big one. It's going to be like, how are they going to get that many vaccinations to half of the global population, right?
Well, Pfizer, for example, their vaccine has to be kept at minus 80 prior to its administration. So that rollout itself is going to be a unique challenge. But we are seeing tremendous challenges within our healthcare system. Folks, please do what you can to limit your aspect of spread and the use of the healthcare system. It was a very sad or troubling the Oilers NHL hockey player who had passed away earlier this year, Colby, and his wife had just expressed the fact that she never got a chance to say goodbye because they weren't allowing anybody to be beside him. She could see him. So, folks, these are the big messages we need to share. It's not always just about whether or not you're sitting, just in a chair in a waiting room. Sometimes it's what aspect of healthcare are you maybe utilizing the time of that somebody else should be. Yeah. And these are difficult. These are the things that happen.
Yeah, and we're going to see probably more restrictions as we go along. And we always know the 2 large groups that I can think of that are the super spreaders, but they'll probably be the last to really put a restriction on, right? Because of the economy, right?
Yeah, because of the economy, and I know we have to be conscious of it, and it is a part of our culture. It's a part of Alberta and our design. How do we, like any place, if you don't have that aspect of your economy, how are you connecting? So, and to also, the ICU doctors really talk a lot about opioids and the fact that anybody who gets injured as a result of that, it starts to affect our healthcare system, and or this is troubling times when it comes to mental health. So as we see mental health being challenged and people looking for other ways to try and feel better and taking drugs or opioids, these are further challenges that end up putting people into hospital and overtaxing our responders, our first responders, our healthcare system, and our the nurses and doctors and everybody who's works in that allied health who are trying to support us. So just a big consciousness that we have to continue to prevail and push through and be supportive of each other.
Yeah, I mean, the opioid thing, it's very interesting. There's a determination because, I check in with a lot of my guys who are still working down in Vancouver in the neighborhood. And they said a lot of people aren't even getting sick with COVID, but they're doing more drugs, right?
Yeah.
And it's usually determined because back in March in the spring when this first happened, a lot of them were hoarding it, and they didn't know what would be down the line a week from now where they could get their fix, so they started to hoard a lot of it and probably overusing as a result.
Wow. Yeah. Those are unique conversations that most of us don't have. And the kind of sort of role you have and those conversations within all of these, whether it's friendship groups or whether it's Indigenous support groups. Yeah, these are the unique challenges that are out there, and it's not just unique to the Indigenous population. Yes, this is where our conversation often comes from, but it's rampant.
Yeah, and then mental health has a lot to do with it. We're trying to encourage a mental health coordinator to be in our region for at least to be on a call-by-call basis for people who are struggling, right? Because, when your mental health starts to dwindle, you look for other things to kind of build you up, right?
To build you up, and anything that feels good is one of those things. Before we jump into, I wanted to ask you, I know you and the family, I think we're working on let's use the term Bannock exercise, so we're going to talk more about that, but let's turn some of our conversation back to being positive, though this is not necessarily positive. Basketballer for GSW, Klay Thompson, recently tore his Achilles. Now, I'm not the biggest GSW fan in the world out there, Golden State Warriors, but I know that guy's pain from having a torn Achilles, which the fact that I tore mine before him, yes, I'm a little bit older, but does that make me more of a pro athlete than he was, or is it timing?
Well, maybe if you're a bowler or maybe a major league pitcher, but I doubt a 6'3" NBA basketball player.
He's probably not threatened by me. Yeah. Who's just this much taller than you. So make sure, Lawrence, though you've injured your Achilles 2 times as a professional dancer. Yeah, I don't want this to befall anybody, but our healthcare system's done a great job of helping move me forward, and I'm blessed by that. So thank you for everybody who's helped me along the way. And I just got to keep moving on.
So are they giving you steroids or anything like that? Cool.
Just a lot of sunshine. They said, just sit around here for quite a while, wear this cast and a lot of sunshine, you'll do all right. And seemingly I am. Alex Trebek. Yes. I think everybody in our country has a duty. The man, I think, did 36 years at the helm of Jeopardy. So there's been a lot said about him. I just wanted to say thank you to Alex and his family. Everybody enjoyed him. He was the most positive icon.
And definitely a non-controversial Canadian living in LA, and but I like the fact that he'd always make fun of some of the contestants every once in a while for being, not the intelligent ones, right? So especially about very common themes like sports and things like that, and they would.
What would happen? It would be great if you and I ended up on the on Jeopardy ourselves. And you and I are faced off against each other, and all the questions were about either pemmican, Métis cart trails, Métis carts themselves. We would do fantastic.
Yeah.
That's the one we need to get on, not the one that has all the complicated math questions. Lawrence, tell us a little bit about, before we go here, I wanted to hear a little bit about the Bannock story.
Well, every once in a while you got to pass things on to the next generation, and my kids are just turned 5 years old, and I thought it'd be time to, give them an option of, baked bannock with butter, or baked bannock with, blueberry jam, right? So, and I made them kind of choose which one they liked. So of course the boy chooses the butter, and the girl chooses the blueberry jam, right? So.
Yeah.
But no, it was a very interesting exercise, especially for me, because I haven't, really made bannock too much in my life. But I've tried fried before, and it just turns out to be a brick. And the baked bannock, you got to be careful you don't fold it too much and all that. So,
well, perhaps what you should be doing is teaching the kids podcasting, because when it comes to podcasting, you do a fantastic job. So maybe that's where your expertise is. So, Lawrence, thank you for that. I wish I was watching you eat it, because it would give us a bit more of what the whole taste was like. But folks, make sure you go to our site, Métis3.org. You'll find out more that's going on. Make sure you go to Métis.org for the provincial relationship. Email us, tsw@métis3.org. Keep giving us the feedback every chance you get. If you could, I know Jason and the rest of us from the TSW would appreciate when you go to YouTube, just click that little button that says subscribe, and it'll keep you up to date with all the information that tells us when we're coming out, when we're releasing our podcasts. And I want to say a big thank you to all of everybody who listens. And this is a difficult time. Lawrence, thank you for taking the time to share with us this Métis conversation about what's happening within our local, what's happening within our region, what's happening within our province, what's happening within our nation. And let's just keep doing this and working towards each other in the most positive of ways.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure you hit subscribe, and let's look forward to the next episode.
Best wishes from the Squeaky Wheel. Keep the fire burning, folks, and we're gone.